All right, so you know how everyone says that coding is like really hard?
Yeah, it's got that reputation for sure.
We're diving into that today.
Like, is it really that tough, especially if you're already interested in tech?
Exactly. And we've got this piece from Algo Academy. They're a coding platform.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
They break down this whole question of, is coding hard, in a really insightful way.
I'm intrigued. What's their take?
Well, first off, they just straight up debunk this myth that you need to be like a math whiz.
Ah, the math genius myth. I bet that scares a lot of people away.
Oh, totally. But they make a good point. It's more about logical thinking than crazy equations.
Makes sense. It's about breaking down a problem and finding the steps to solve it.
Exactly. Anyone can learn that with practice.
Plus, I think Algo Academy mentions how all these new tools and resources are making coding way more accessible, right?
Yeah, they do. It's
Yeah.
not this exclusive club anymore.
That's great to hear.
But, okay, real talk, there's obviously still a learning curve, like with anything new.
For sure. For sure.
But Algo Academy does a good job of setting realistic expectations.
Oh, how so?
Well, they acknowledge those early hurdles, like wrapping your head around new concepts.
Oh, yeah, and all the syntax stuff.
Exactly. It's a lot to absorb at first.
It can feel kind of like learning a new language, almost.
That's a great way to put it. It's going to feel awkward at first, but then...
But then you have that moment where, like, a grammar rule clicks or...
Yes. Or you can finally have a simple conversation.
It's so satisfying. Those aha moments in coding, those are what keep you going.
Total light bulb moment, and Algo Academy really stresses how important those moments are.
I bet, because even for experienced coders, it's all about continuous learning.
Oh, for sure.
Tech just changes so fast, it never really stops.
Keeps things exciting, though, right?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely not boring. Okay, so we've busted some myths, talked about the learning curve, but what about, like, actually doing it?
Right, let's get practical. Well, Algo Academy outlines some really solid strategies, and it starts with nailing those basics.
Basics, huh? What do they consider basics?
Things like understanding variables, data types, all those foundational building blocks.
Ah, so it's not just about getting something to work, but building it well from the start.
Exactly. And then they stress the importance of consistent practice, even if it's just 30 minutes a day.
Ah, that makes it feel way more doable. Small chunks add up.
Totally. And then this is key, building projects, even simple ones.
I've heard that's super helpful. Why is that so important, do they say?
Because it's hands-on, you're applying what you've learned, seeing the code come to life.
Makes it feel a lot more real than just reading about theory, huh?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's like, yeah, I made this thing.
Exactly. And even if it's a basic to-do list app, that's still valuable experience.
Totally. Now, along the way, you're going to hit some snags, right? Debugging time.
Ugh, debugging. Everyone's favorite.
I know. But Algo Academy has this cool take on it. They frame it as a problem-solving skill.
So those error messages, they're not the enemy, they're like clues.
Exactly. It's like a puzzle to figure out.
I like that perspective. And they talk about using those debugging tools effectively.
Yeah, and then, of course, there's the whole universe of online resources, tutorials, forums. It's amazing.
It's like having a global support group for coding, all the help you could need.
For sure. But I want to talk about the mental game, too, because you've got information overload.
Oh, yeah, that's a real thing.
And then there's that imposter syndrome that creeps up.
It's so common, feeling like you don't belong.
Ugh, I know that feeling all too well. So how does Algo Academy address that?
They're really honest about it. They say, focus on your progress, celebrate the small wins, and remember, everyone starts somewhere.
Good advice. It's easy to compare yourself to others and feel inadequate.
Yeah, like comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. Doesn't make sense.
Nope, not at all. Okay, what about those moments when you're stuck debugging, frustration is high?
Oh, been there. What do they recommend?
They say break down your code, test it piece by piece, find the problems systematically.
Good strategy. Don't just change things randomly and hope for the best.
Right, and if you're still lost, reach out for help. Online communities, mentors, anyone who can give you a fresh perspective.
The coding community can be so helpful.
It really is. It's about remembering that you're not in this alone.
Now, what about when your motivation takes a dip? Those slumps happen to everyone.
Oh yeah, definitely. What does Algo Academy say about that?
They're big on setting small goals, celebrating those milestones, and finding ways to make coding fun.
Fun. Is that even possible?
Right, but think about it. If you're working on a project you're passionate about,
That makes a huge difference.
it becomes less of a chore and more of like a creative outlet.
I love that. So we've talked about the individual side of things,
Hmm.
but we also have to acknowledge the role of a platform like Algo Academy itself.
Oh, yeah, for sure. What's their approach?
Well, they offer a very structured path, which can be super helpful for beginners who might feel overwhelmed.
Makes sense. It's like having a map through the coding world so you don't get lost.
Exactly. And they're big on interactive learning. You're not just
Yeah.
watching videos, you're writing and running code,
Yeah.
getting that hands-on experience.
That's so important for really understanding how things work. And they have ways to track your progress too, right?
Yep. Which can be super motivating.
Oh, totally. Seeing how far you've come is huge.
And then there's the whole community aspect, the forums, the groups. It's a built-in support system.
I feel like Algo Academy really understands how important that is, that sense of belonging.
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone learns at their own pace. But I'm curious, does Algo Academy give any guidance on, like, a realistic timeline for going from total newbie to job ready?
Good question. Do they have a roadmap or something?
They do,
Yeah.
but they're very upfront that it's just a guide. Everyone's different.
Of course, makes sense. But just for reference, what does their timeline look like?
Okay, so they say the first 3 months are all about building that foundation we talked about.
So mastering the basics, getting comfortable with the language, all that good stuff.
Exactly. And then from 3 to 6 months, you start branching out, learning more advanced concepts, different tools.
So you're going deeper down the rabbit hole.
Yep. And then from 6 to 12 months, that's when the focus shifts to specialization and job prep.
Makes sense. So you're figuring out if you want to be a web developer, a mobile app developer, a data scientist.
Yeah, you're choosing your path and then really honing in on those specific skills.
Okay, so it's a solid year of dedicated learning, roughly, to get to a point where you could start applying for jobs.
Yeah, that's their general guideline. But again, they emphasize everyone's different. Don't get hung up on deadlines.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
Absolutely. And even after you land a job, the learning never really stops. Technology is always changing.
Right. Got to stay curious and keep learning new things. Okay, so taking a step back, looking at the big picture from Algo Academy, it seems like their message is learning to code might have this rep for being super hard, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, it's not easy, but it's also not impossible. With dedication, the right resources, and a growth mindset, anyone can do it.
And platforms like Algo Academy are making it more accessible and less intimidating, especially for beginners.
They really are. They're providing that structure, that support, and making it engaging.
Absolutely. And I love how they emphasize building projects, even those simple ones. It really helps solidify your understanding.
Totally. So I'm going to throw this out to you, listener. Thinking about everything we've talked about, what kind of project would get you excited to start coding? What would make you feel like, yes, this is why I want to learn this? Hold on to that thought, because we're going to dive into some of the most popular learning paths and talk about finding the right resources for you.
Can't wait to explore that more. Welcome back.
So we've kind of established, learning to code, it's totally doable. It's not this impossible thing. But there's so many directions you can go with it. How do you even choose where to focus?
It's true. The coding world is huge EE. It's easy to get lost. We touched on specialization a bit earlier, and I think it's worth digging into that a little more.
Yeah, let's break it down. What are some of those most popular paths people take?
All right, so one that probably comes to mind for a lot of people is web development.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Web dev is super popular.
And for good reason, right? It's basically behind every website and web application we use.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Like from simple informational sites to those complex e-commerce platforms, that's all thanks to web developers.
Exactly. And even within web development, there's different areas of focus. You got front end, back end, and full stack development.
Okay, break that down for me. What's the difference between those three?
So front end developers, they're all about the visual stuff, what you see on a website, what you interact with. That's their domain.
Ah, okay, so they make sure the site looks good.
Yeah?
A&D is easy to use.
Yep. They use languages like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to make it all happen.
Got it. So they're focused on what we actually see and experience when we're on a website.
Exactly. Now, back-end developers, they're more behind the scenes. They work on the guts of the website.
Stuff we don't see, but makes the whole thing actually work.
Right. Think databases, servers, all that complex logic that makes it run smoothly.
I see. So they're like the engineers making sure the website engine runs properly.
Yeah, good analogy. And they use different languages too, like Python, Java, or Ruby. Then you have the full stack developers, and they're kind of like the superheroes who do both.
Whoa, front end, A&D, back end.
Yep, they've got a broad range of skills, comfortable working on all layers of the website.
That's impressive. Okay, so that's web development. Now, what about mobile app development? I feel like that's another huge area these days.
It is. Everyone's on their phones or tablets, so the demand for mobile app developers is through the roof.
It's true. And if you've ever had an idea for a cool app, like a game or a productivity tool, that's the path for you.
Exactly. And just like web dev, there are different platforms to specialize in. You could focus on iOS development for Apple devices or Android development for, well, Android.
So you can really niche down within that field.
Exactly. All right, let's switch gears a bit. Data science is another exciting one.
Ooh, data science. Yeah, that one feels really cutting edge.
It is. It's all about extracting knowledge and insights from data. Think big data, algorithms, machine learning, all that jazz.
It seems like data science is behind so many innovations these days.
It really is. Data scientists use their coding skills to collect, clean, analyze, and interpret huge amounts of data.
So they're like data detectives uncovering patterns and trends.
Yeah, great way to put it. And they often use languages like Python or R for that.
This is all super cool, but I got to be honest, it's also kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
There's so many options. How do you even know where you fit in?
That's the million-dollar question, right? I think the best way to approach it is to think about what you're actually passionate about.
What gets you fired up? What problems are you interested in solving?
Exactly. What kind of work environment do you see yourself thriving in?
It's like finding that intersection between your interests, your skills, and the needs of the world.
Right. And don't be afraid to experiment. Try out different languages, dabble in different projects, see what clicks. You don't have to have it all figured out on day one.
That takes the pressure off a bit. It's a journey, and it's okay to explore. And even if you start down one path and realize it's not for you, you can always pivot.
That's true. Those coding skills are transferable. You can apply them in other areas. But no matter what path you choose, there are going to be challenges. Right?
Oh, for sure. You're going to hit roadblocks. You're going to have moments of doubt, maybe even that imposter syndrome creeping in.
It's normal. It's all part of the process. Even the most seasoned coders have been there.
So how do we deal with those moments? What kind of advice does Algo Academy offer?
Well, they really stress building a support system. Surround yourself with people who get it.
So friends, family, online communities, mentors, anyone who can offer encouragement and advice.
Exactly. You need those people to celebrate wins with Andy, to vent to when you're stuck on a bug for hours.
It's like misery loves company, but in a good way, like shared struggle.
Exactly. And they also talk about the importance of celebrating those small victories along the way.
Ah, yes. Those little wins can keep you going.
Coding is a marathon, not a sprint, so acknowledge those milestones.
It's like you finally got that function to work correctly. Celebrate.
Exactly. Even if it seems like a tiny thing, it's still progress. And hey, don't forget about making it fun.
Fun. In coding. Is that even possible?
It can be. Remember how we talked about the power of building projects?
Yeah.
Well, choose projects that genuinely excite you, something that sparks your interest, even if it seems simple at first.
It's got to be something you're invested in.
Exactly. It becomes less about work and more about, expressing your creativity, problem solving. It's like a big sandbox where you get to build whatever you want.
I like that analogy. And another thing, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Oh, yeah, super important. Remember that whole coding community we talked about?
They're there for you. Use them.
Exactly. There's online forums, groups, even mentorship programs. You don't have to struggle alone.
It's about embracing that collaborative spirit. Coding isn't this solo thing. It's a community effort.
It really is. And you know what else? Learning to code, it's not about reaching a finish line. It's more like ongoing training.
Because technology is always evolving, so you got to keep up.
Exactly. Even once you've got the basics down, even once you've got a job, you're still learning, still growing.
It's a lifelong journey.
It is. And honestly, that's what keeps it exciting.
All right, so big takeaway here. Learning to code is totally doable. It's a journey. It'll have challenges. But with the right mindset, resources, and support, you can totally make it happen.
And it can lead to amazing things. Whether you're dreaming of building websites, creating apps, or diving into the world of data, there's a place for you in coding.
Absolutely. And hey, who knows? Maybe you'll be the one inspiring others to learn someday. All right, let's shift gears a bit now and talk about the practical side of things. What are the tools, the resources that are actually out there? Yeah, how do you choose the right ones, and how do you make the learning process as smooth and, dare I say, enjoyable as possible?
Great questions. We'll dive into all that right after.
Okay, so we're back, and now it's time to get into, the actual HIW of learning to code.
Right. We've talked about the why, the what, the challenges.
But now it's like, okay, How do I actually do this thing?
Let's equip you with the tools and the knowledge to actually make it happen.
So where do we even begin? What are the best resources if you're just starting out?
Well, the good news is there's a ton of amazing resources out there, both free and paid.
I know, right? It's kind of overwhelming.
It's like a giant buffet of coding knowledge,
Yeah.
but it can be hard to know where to start.
Seriously. Like, do I just grab a plate and hope for the best?
Well, one of the first things you'll probably want to do is choose a programming language to focus on.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But how do you pick?
Think back to what we talked about earlier, specialization. Different languages are good for different things.
Right, like Python is popular for data science, JavaScript for web development.
Exactly. So it helps to have at least a general idea of what you're interested in before you jump into a specific language.
Got it. So you've picked a language. What's next?
This is where those coding platforms come in.
Yeah.
Algocademy is a great one, but there's also Codecademy, Free Code Camp, Khan Academy. So many options.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
Yeah.
What's the benefit of using one of these platforms?
They give you structured courses, interactive exercises, and a lot of them have community forums so you can connect with other learners.
Ah, so it's like having a classroom, but you can learn at your own pace.
Yeah, exactly. And they take a lot of the guesswork out of it. You don't have to piece together random tutorials online.
Okay, that sounds way less intimidating. But what about books?
Oh, yeah. Good old-fashioned books are fantastic, too.
I love a good coding book.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason to use books over a platform?
Sometimes books go into more depth than those online courses, which can be really helpful as you start to get more advanced.
Got it. So we've got platforms, books. What else is out there?
Don't forget about all those online tutorials and videos. YouTube is a goldmine for coding content.
Oh, for sure. There's so much stuff on YouTube.
And a lot of it is free, so you can really supplement your learning without spending anything extra.
That's awesome. Okay, so now we've got all these resources. Let's talk about the learning process itself. Any tips for making it, like, as smooth and enjoyable as possible?
Well, first off, set realistic goals. Don't try to learn everything at once. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, that makes sense. Don't try to, like, chug the entire coding fire hose.
Exactly. Break your learning down into smaller, manageable chunks. Start with the basics, master those, and then gradually build up.
Okay, so it's more like a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. And Algocademy really stresses that too. Their platform is designed to guide you through that gradual progression.
So it's all about building a solid foundation and then adding on from there.
Yep. And along the way, celebrate those small wins. Don't downplay them. They're important.
Ah, those little victories are what keep you going.
Right. It's all about staying motivated. And speaking of staying motivated, try to find ways to make coding fun.
Okay, that's a challenge. But how?
Well, think about those projects we keep talking about.
Oh, yeah, right.
Choose projects that you're actually interested in. Maybe it's building a website, creating a simple game, or even automating something you do every day.
So it has to be something that, like, speaks to you personally.
Exactly. That way it feels less like work and more like a creative outlet. And don't be afraid to experiment. Try new things, see what works.
Okay, that takes the pressure off a bit. And what if you get stuck?
Ask for help. Don't forget about that amazing coding community we talked about.
Oh, yeah, those online forums, groups, mentors, they're gold.
They really are. So don't struggle in silence. Reach out, ask questions, get that extra support. It's there for you.
It's like a global network of coding buddies, so you're never really alone in this.
Exactly. And remember, learning to code, it's not like a one-time thing.
Yeah, it's not like you learn it and then you're done.
Right. The tech world is constantly changing, so even when you've mastered the basics, even when you've landed a job, you're still going to be learning new things.
So it's more like a lifelong commitment to learning.
It is. And honestly, that's what makes it exciting. All right, to wrap things up here, I hope you're leaving this deep dive feeling inspired and ready to tackle the world of coding.
Yeah, it might seem daunting at first, but it's totally doable. With the right resources, the right mindset, and a supportive community, anyone can learn to code.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the technical skills, it's about developing that problem-solving mindset, that creativity, that resilience.
It's about learning how to think in new ways. And those are skills that will benefit you no matter what you do in life.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to our listeners, we encourage you, keep that curiosity going, embrace the challenge, have fun with it, and see where this coding adventure takes you.
You might just surprise yourself with what you're capable of creating. And hey, maybe someday you'll be the one inspiring others to dive into the world of code.
That's a great thought. All right, that's it for our coding deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed it.
And if you have any questions or want to share your own coding journey, feel free to connect with us on social media. We'd love to hear from you.
Happy coding, everyone!